Well, good afternoon. Thank you for all of you coming, and I appreciate it. It's glad to be here with all of you again. I hope everyone is feeling well and staying safe as we go through this process. Today, I'm going to go over a number of things with you. I want you to feel comfortable of asking questions. Tomorrow, there will be another campus conversation on the main campus, which you can get online, just like I'm talking, and it will be about returning to work. We're not going to talk a whole lot about that today because I'd like you to be able to hear that and then be able to ask your questions later. I will tell you that we're going to start having a campus meeting once a week until we're back on campus, so that we can get everybody kept up to date as things move about and as we do these, the new things that come. I wished I could tell you that everything is stable and we know exactly what we're doing now and everything will be fine. I can't tell you, I think everything's going to be fine, but I can't tell you that everything we know yet, because this again is still a moving target. So, we're going to talk about today several things, and then we'll take some questions if you have them. And then again, we will be starting once a week. And starting next week, I will have some of my administrators with us so that they can ask specific questions in their areas. So if you have questions about facilities, about student life, we will have those people. About academics. Our provost will be with us. So just be prepared to send us some questions. And the sooner you send the questions, the better it is, because then that gives people to make sure they know the right answer if we have one. So that being said, let me tell you that as we move through this, things are moving, and they are moving toward us coming back to campus. So I would like to go over some of the things that I think we need to know. First of all, let's talk about rumors. Boy, we always have the rumors, don't we? The first rumor that seems to be circulating is that those people that are on furlough are not going to be coming back. There is not an ounce of truth on that. Everyone that is in furlough will be asked to come back to WVU Tech, to Morgantown, or to Kaiser, wherever. We actually have a few of those people already back that are helping with us to get the campus ready for our students, our staff, and our faculty. So that being said, let me make sure that you know that we still have a limited number of people on campus. If you have a great need, the faculty, if you have a great need for something to happen in your office, you need to let Rob Moyers know. But I'm going to tell you, they're very much trying to get everything ready for students to come back. And there's still very few of them compared to what we usually have. So it may take a little while. So I'm just asking you to be patient and to understand that we're trying to do the best we can with as few people as we have. The other thing is I know that the memo that went out about pay cuts, the possibility of pay cuts, caused people to have quite a bit of stress. And I'm sorry that that happened in that manner. But I think the university, and I know the university, was trying very hard to be as open as they could. I can honestly tell you that that discussion is not going on as we speak. That is only a worst case scenario that could happen if the worst comes about. But right now, we're working hard to get our faculty and our staff ready to come back. We're working hard to get our number of students to come back as possible. And right now, that's not being discussed. So I think we didn't want you to think that it wasn't a possibility. Like everything else in life, there are possibilities, but it is not something that's being discussed right now, because at this point, we're okay. The other thing is the return to campus. There seems to be some misunderstandings. So the one thing I am going to talk about is that you can return to campus without a test right now. So if you need to come to campus, and I'm talking about the faculty or the staff, if you need to come to campus, we just follow the same rules we've been talking about. Call your supervisor and they will let you know, make sure it's fine. You need to tell them when you're going to be here and the time frame. There is no limited time frame. In other words, if you need to come in and work in your office for 8 hours, then you're allowed to do that. You just have to let somebody know when you're going to be there and the times. You will need to make sure that when you're in the building, you have a mask on, wash your hands, all the things we've talked about, and do the distancing. Now, that course, if you're in your office by yourself, you don't have to have a mask. But I just wanted to tell you that there seems to be some misunderstandings about that, and I wanted to get that straight. All right, so let me tell you, anybody that's coming back to campus, we would also like you to do a self-check. If you're not feeling well, if you have a temperature, please don't come to campus. And that goes for not now, but the rest of the semester. We need to make sure that if people are ill, that they stay off campus as long as possible till we make sure it is not this very dreaded disease. So you'll let your supervisor know, and they will work with you. That will be done on a one-to-one basis with your supervisor, and they'll work with you as we go down that road. Now, let's talk about testing. Everyone will need to be tested, whether it be a faculty, a staff, or a student. And the first question I always get is, well, what if I've been tested, or can I bring a test results with me? And the answer is no to either one of those. WVU wants to have a baseline of testing. So the day you come, you will have to bring either your student ID, your faculty and your staff, the university ID, or if you're a staff or a faculty member, you must know what your employment number is, your WVU employment number. You also must bring some personal identification, like your driver's license. We'll have testing from August the 11th through the 13th. You will get an email around the 3rd of August that will give you directions of how to sign up to do the testing. We will have 5 drive-through sites and 4 sit-down sites in Van Meter here on campus, and you will sign up for one of those. You must sign up. We must have that information in the database before you come. We'll talk a little more about that as we get along next week. We'll also talk a little bit more and make sure that we have the exact wording of how the test results will be given to you. So we'll be doing that the 11th through the 13th, as I said before. Now, you also yesterday got an email talking about signing up to volunteer. We need volunteers for those 3 days to help us as we move through this process. We, of course, need our medical personnel, which we will be getting, and unless you are an EMT, a nurse, we have some of our faculty that are going to, nursing faculty. Dr. Larry Rhodes is going to be one of our collectors, and some of our senior nursing students are going to be our collectors. But, of course, they will be overseen by our regular nurse and our nurse practitioners. So, but we need people there to help them to hold the bag for the collections. We need someone that can sit and type in all the things so that you can get your label to put on your the bag that has your specimen in it. And then we will need people for parking, and we will need people for runners and several other things. You will in that email, you will see there's a place. We are not telling anybody they have to do this. We're just asking if you'd be willing to help with this as we move forward, because we will need some more people to help us get through this for those 3 days. So if you're willing to do it and feel comfortable, everybody will be provided the masks. The people that are doing the collections and holding the things will be absolutely provided all of the PPE materials that they need that is important for them. And so we're asking if you would be willing to volunteer, then sign up, and we would appreciate it. The other thing is, you need to know that you will be provided lunch, you'll be provided snacks and water, and there will be breaks for everybody. So it's not as if you're going to come and stand or do something for 8 hours alone. We will make sure that you are as comfortable as possible as we go through this. So those are the 3 things about the testing. The next thing I want to talk about at this point is, and before I forget, there will be a day of training for those people that are going to volunteer. we will have you to come back to campus. We don't have that date locked down yet, but it will be before the training, and we will bring you to campus that day. We'll probably do your tests that day, so everybody will be tested before we do the testing for other people. And we will do the training of exactly, make sure we're all comfortable with whatever assignment we have. So that will be coming down the pike. Next, I want to talk about the classrooms and what we have done to make people feel a little safer. And I'm going to read this, so I apologize, my face will be down a little bit, but I want to make sure I don't forget anything here when it comes to this. All of our classrooms and our labs, that's every single one, will have rolling 6-foot by 6-foot plexiglass shields for the front of the room for the instructors to stand behind. So every classroom will have that. All of the faculty, you will receive a mask, a clear face shield, hand sanitizers, markers, erasers, and whiteboard cleaners in a bag. Those you will pick up the day of the testing. Right now, we have approximately 20 classrooms that have Zoom capabilities, and we will be using those so that we can do social distancing in our classrooms. All of our labs will have Zoom capabilities, and that will include our computer labs. When possible, every other chair will be removed from the classroom. The fixed chairs will have a label on them or the desk asking the students not to sit there. And every classroom will have a floor plan that shows you how we meet the standards. Faculty, you will also get a copy of that floor plan for every single class you have. And before the first couple of weeks are over, we will ask you to give us a seating chart. So we will ask that every classroom have a seating chart. And down the road, those will be used in case we have a student that tests positive or a faculty member, so that we know who was sitting close to those students to be able to talk with them to make sure they don't need to be quarantined along with the other students. So seating in the labs, of course, are a little more difficult, and we have ordered face guards, of course, for all the faculty, but for all the students in the labs, they will also have face guards. So we want to make sure that they feel comfortable, because some of that will be done. It still will be distancing for them, but some of it won't be quite as much, and we do know that sometimes they need to work together. All of our labs will get a hand sanitizer pump mounted in the room. So every classroom and lab will have that. All classrooms and labs will have a tub of cleaner wipes for the instructors area. All computers will have a tub of cleaners wipes for the keyboards and the mouse. And every faculty and staff will get a tub of cleaner and wipes for their offices. Now, of course, all of our students are also going to get face masks, hand sanitizers, and I think of course, we said the labs will have the shields, and then all of our students, I think, will be getting the little things that you punch the elevators with, and I'm assuming those also will be in the faculty's thing. So I wanted to make sure you knew some of the things that's going to be going on and what we will be getting. Now, you'll also see signage all over campus. I think it was mentioned that we may just be kind of blinded by all the signage, but it is important that we look at the signage and try to follow it as close as humanly possible, because that's all about distancing and how we will do that. We still are going to require that everyone on campus have a mask and use it when they are indoors for any reason other than in your dorm rooms or in your offices when you're by yourself. As I said before, there will be seating charts, and we are working very hard to look at a couple of unique things. We're talking about maybe putting some of our big tents outside so that our staff and our students will have a way to maybe have meetings if they can't Zoom, or if there's few enough of them that they can social distance under the tents and they feel better outside. If we can do that, and we plan on it unless something happens, Then faculty, if you want to go and take your class outside, if you're not Zooming or something of that nature, doing a flex class, you're welcome to do that also. Or even if there's not a tent, if you want to go sit out under the trees somewhere. The outdoors, we know, is a much safer place to be. And so we thought that we would absolutely, because we don't want our students feeling like they can't congregate in places. That's not normal. So we have to give them places that we think are safe. And we're going to work with those. Now, if you start congregating and not being safe, then we will have to do something else. But I trust our Golden Bears. I trust our campus that we are going to do the right thing because we're going to take care of each other. So those are some of the things that the personal responsibility will also be very important. Now for a minute, let's talk about our international students. We all know and love having as many international students we have on campus, but I will tell you that this is becoming very difficult for them to get back to the United States. The good news is that yesterday the president rescinded his order that if we had to go online or if they had only online classes, they would have to stay in their own country or go back to it. He rescinded that. The biggest issue we're going to have is getting them here now. And so that's becoming very difficult. So I want to let the faculty know that we're going to work with you all one-on-one. If you have a student that can't get back, we're going to see if we can maybe provide that class online, maybe, and that may not be the way it can happen, especially in engineering. But we also need to find out if there's ways we can help that student if they can't get back for 2 weeks. We think the 1st of September may be the date that a lot of them can only get back to. And so we want to be sure that we're helping them make sure they don't get behind in their classwork and not putting too much of a burden on our faculty. So I wanted you to know that's where we are. In sports, we're still planning on having a season at this point. That is another one of those moving targets, moving every day. But we're hoping that all of our athletes are back here on campus, ready to go to school and ready to play. And we will deal with it as it comes. We really don't know the answers to all of that yet, but we're working very hard to make sure we can get everybody back here and have a great year. Just like everything else, we got to learn to pivot. And we're going to need to do that as much as possible and being able to find ways to do that. I know there is great concern about what's happening in Mon County. Certainly it's concern any time that we have an uptick in the number of cases anywhere, whether it be in Beckley, whether it be in Charleston, no matter where it is. But Morgantown is absolutely dealing with some very tough things. And one of those reasons is that we have to make sure our students are acting responsibly. And I know that our Golden Bears are going to step up to the plate and do that. And I think part of that's going to be so that we make sure that they understand what we expect of them, and they will understand that we're going to also respect them, and making sure that they understand how we need to do this to get through a year. I also want you to know that I know that there's a lot of concern about, well, what happens in Morgantown? What happens if they would have to go online? I can tell you right now, they're not planning on going online totally. They are still looking at opening campuses just like we are. But I also want you to be aware that I am in discussions with Morgantown that if they have a problem and we don't, I think we'll be given permission to stay like we're doing now in seat. That's not been determined, but we're in discussions about that, of how important it is that we all do what's best for us on our own campus. And sometimes the things that happen in Morgantown don't happen down here, and some things that happen down here don't happen there. So we're going to be looking at that. So I don't want you to, just like when you look at the campus conversations, when they say, we want as many people to work from home as possible, there are more ways in Morgantown for people to work from home than there are at Tech, because we have many less employees than they have compared to the number of students. So those are the things that we have to balance along with this. So I just wanted you to know that we still plan on, Morgantown is planning on opening the campus. I think we will have a better idea of exactly how everything's going to happen by the 1st of August. I think we'll know that, because I think that's kind of the date we have to go by to get things done. So that's one of the reasons I think it's important that we have campus meetings every week to bring you up to date if anything's changed, if anything hasn't changed, and to answer your questions as we go through. As I said, the main thing is I wanted faculty to feel comfortable. I want them to also know how important it is that they engage with their students. Student engagement is extremely important to all of us. And Zoom is fine, but we are going to have some interactions personally, not just in the classroom, but probably in some other ways. We just do it safely. That being said, we have quite a few new faculty are coming to campus, and I want you to know that it's very important for me to get to know those faculty and get to make sure they know that we're here to support them just like you support them in your areas. So we will be having some meetings, probably in Carter Hall. We'll probably limit the number of people that can come, and I may do it in shifts. So instead of having one campus meeting, which we probably will have on Zoom, but instead of having some of those, I may have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 meetings with departments that have new faculty, and we will distance, but we'll get to know each other a little bit and make them feel welcome to the Golden Bear family. I just think it's important that some of that personal things happen. I realize Jen Wood Cunningham is probably at her desk, wringing her hands, thinking, how am I going to keep Mrs. Long from hugging? And I've learned not to hug immediately, okay? So I will not do that. It will be one of the tougher things I've ever done, but I will not do that until it's okay to do it. So I just wanted you to know that we will be having those things. We'll be limiting the numbers, but it is important. The other thing I want the faculty to know is that I probably will be popping in classrooms this year more than ever, because I would like not only to make sure the faculty know how much we appreciate all the hard work they're doing, but the students, and we're so glad they're back and that they can see me in person, not just on a Zoom meeting. So I apologize ahead of time if I interrupt you, but I won't stay more than a couple of minutes. But I do want you to know that that probably will be happening some, so you can expect that. As I said, next week we will have another meeting, and we'll answer your questions. So if you have big questions, send them early so I can get them to the right people, as I said before, to make sure that they know what's happening and they can have the answers for you. We have one question before we go to the questions in the chat that was asked: was it possible for us to put all of our classes, have our classes in person and online? And really the answer to that is no. And one of the reasons is that is double duty for our faculty. Our faculty have worked very hard, some of them doing the flex, which is very difficult. I will tell you, that's not easy. Some are doing some online, and most are doing in person or a variation of that. For them to also say that they have to have the class online is very difficult. That's doubling their work. It would probably be cost prohibitive, but it also would be a burden for our faculty to have to do both. So that probably is not going to happen in any sense. We may have a few that do that. If you are a person that certainly has a disability or has a condition that would keep you from coming to class, please let us know, because we can work with you and see if we can rearrange a schedule and make sure you get a schedule that's possible. Sadly, fear is not the reason that we don't come. We can't make any promises. Nobody can make promises. I can't promise it that you're not going to get this here any more than I can promise you aren't going to get a cold. It is what it is. If you feel that uncomfortable, sadly, you may have to rethink, is this a semester I take off? We want everybody here, and we want everybody to feel as comfortable as possible. But there are things in life that you have to make decisions about. We respect all of our students, our faculty and our staff, and how they feel, but we are moving forward to come to campus in person. And as I said, if you have disabilities or have an issue that a health issue that we need to work with you, we're more than happy to do that and see what we can do. But to say that we can put every class online and in seat is not something we would be able to do. So I just want you to know that, and I appreciate it. The other thing is, one of the things I want to, we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see, Jan, are there any more questions? I see there's a few down there.
Yes, Carolyn, we have a few questions, and the first one we've been chatting about in the questions and gave that answer, but just for folks that are watching it archived, wanted to make sure that if folks have questions about the specific testing dates and they have an issue of not being able to meet those dates, please send an email with your contact information at techrelations@mail.wvu.edu so that we can address those on a case-by-case basis. Carolyn, related to testing, what do we do if we see that there are positives as a result of our broad testing? Well,
and that's a great question, and I should have addressed that before, and I apologize. First of all, there probably will be some positives. I'm not going to say there isn't. We're going to test just here at Tech approximately 2,000 people. So, you know, it would be naive to tell you with what's going on in the world that we aren't going to have some positives. But we will be asking people after they're tested to not quarantine necessarily, but to make sure that they're very, very safe with the masks and all of that until they get their test results back. If they get a positive back, we will be working with them directly to find a way for them to quarantine for 14 days, to help them if they're a professor, whether they're a staff member or whether they're a student, finding ways to help them as we move through this process. So it will be on a one-to-one basis, but they will have, if you get a negative, you will be looking up your email and it'll tell you, but we will be told if there is a positive and how we need to work with you. It also will go to the health department, of course, and I can get Larry, Dr. Rhodes can get in a little more detail on that, or Peggy when we have our meeting on Friday. But we do have a method and we have a system of what we will be doing, not only if you live off campus, but if you live on campus. We will have places for you to quarantine if you live on campus. Okay, Jan, what else?
Okay, the next question, you talked a little bit about folks being outside and outdoor spaces, but this question is specifically about hallways, and I also think that maybe we should talk about walkways outside as well. Are there going to be procedures to address congestion in the hallways or outdoor walkways, and how do we keep ourselves safe?
Well, the outdoor walkways, of course, are not ours. They belong to the state. So we may be putting some signage on there, but we will be asking our students to socially distance there. Plus, we will be asking them if they're walking to and from class with groups, even social distancing as much as possible, to have their masks on. Classrooms going and coming, we're working on a method that I hope by next week I will have a way to tell you that students do not come into the classroom until it's ready. And then when they leave, they'll be going one direction. The students coming in will be coming in another direction, so that we will not have any more congestion than possible. Now, can we solve all of that? Absolutely not. You know that as well as I do. But we're going to have a method, and we hope we can do that in that way. That's why we're also talking about all of this signage we have. So there will be signs in the hallways, on the floors, down the walkways of how you do that in the social distancing.
Okay, the next question is a little bit about the announcement that went out yesterday about employee expectations, knowing that some supervisors will be working, or that supervisors will be working with their employees about the method of how they're working, whether it's hybrid, all on campus, or all remotely. We specifically have a question about someone who has worked remotely successfully since March 17th, and is not essential to be on campus, would it be possible, and how would it be possible for them to continue to work remotely?
Those questions have to be asked directly to your supervisor. The supervisor has control on who comes to campus, who does not come to campus, and whether there will be flexibility, or whether there will be rotations, or whether there will be a total home assignment. So they will need directly, those again are one-on-one situations that need to be discussed directly with the supervisor.
And to continue in that vein, if you're working from home full-time because that's your assignment after the semester begins, but need to go to campus to pick something up, would they need to be tested ahead of time?
Everyone that will be coming to campus under any circumstances for the rest of this year, or this semester, I should say, will need to be tested. So even if you think you're only going to come and pick something up, you will need to be tested within that window of the 11th through the 14th.
Elaborating a little bit more on faculty and students working together to provide classes in a blended delivery. The question is, how can it be a burden for faculty to offer those courses simultaneously, but not a burden for students to risk being on campus?
Well, you've got to understand that this is not a simple way. You don't just take the course you're doing in person and just put it over onto the platform of that. It is one of those things that's much more difficult than it looks. Let's put it that way. And it's much more time consuming. Plus the fact then you are really asking that faculty member to teach 2 classes instead of 1. So it is just not possible. It's not happening on the Morgantown campus, and it's not happening here. So I understand the concern, but the risk is no different than the faculty member being in that classroom face to face than for the student. And sometimes in many cases, that faculty member has more of a risk because of their age or their condition. So, we're not asking anything different of students than we are of faculty in that way. And as I said, I wished I could tell you that, there's no fear and there's no risk at all, but there is. And you will have to make that decision of how you move forward if you want to come to campus.
So we do have a question about the setup of the Zoom classrooms or the simulcast classrooms, and I'm sure we can have Rob talk a little more about that next week, but if you want to give kind of a preview of some of that, Carolyn.
Well, we have ordered and have in stock some. There will actually be cameras. There will be microphones in those rooms. So all you have to do is to bring your computer, and you will be able to simultaneously show what you need. If you're working at the whiteboard, the camera will follow you, and you'll be able to work on the whiteboard, and they will be able to see if you're zooming something. You will be able to put up on the screen also, like if you have a PowerPoint. So that's how those work in those rooms particularly, and in the lab. And one of the reasons that's going to work is the way it does is because we may have some classes that will be assigned 2 different rooms, and you'll have one faculty member in the one room. And they will be able to then see the other people in that room and answer questions from both rooms, or those rooms will be very close together. We've made sure of that. Then they can walk across and make sure they have total interaction with their students. And as I said, next week I'll have Mike Webb also here that can answer any of those questions if you have questions about how that works.
Related to technology, Carolyn, we have a follow-up question about loaner technology or access to technology for students on campus if they need it. And I know we chatted some about in some of our meetings about providing resources to students in the library if they have accessibility issues or access issues. And we're going to have some other ways for students that will roll out in the coming weeks about how students get that support. But is there any other things that you want to share around access to technology for our students?
Well, no, but we are looking at spaces so that we make sure students have indoor spaces where they can distance. If they have, let's say you have an in-seat class at 9 o'clock and you have a Zoom meeting at 11. We're going to have spaces where you can go, where you can socially distance. You probably will need to bring your laptops with you, though, to do that, to be honest, because we won't have all that. We have some loaners, but we don't have a huge number of computer loaners. So we'll let you know more about that, but we will have places indoors. We are lucky in one way. It also works outdoors. We have an awful lot of connectivity outdoors here around our campus. And I think what's interesting is Morgantown doesn't have that. Very few places do they have that outdoors. So we also have some outdoor spaces, but we will make sure that you have a space so that you don't have, if you're a commuter student especially, you don't have to be traveling back and forth because of that.
Carolyn, this question is about course delivery. Were faculty given the option to decide whether to teach online or in-seat?
They were not given the option because if we're going to have class and have it, we wanted the vast majority of our classes to be in-seat. So they were not given the option. We do have some faculty that have asked for exemptions because of underlying conditions. And there are some faculties that had been teaching some online courses normally during that session. But we did not give them an option because, again, as I said, we want the majority of the courses to be in seats. I think our percentage is a little larger than Morgantown's, but as of the other day, Morgantown had basically 70+% of their classes in seat.
Okay, this is a little bit about the academic calendar. Two questions here. Do we have a set day for students to come back on campus? So let's chat a little bit about move-in as well as the first day of classes. And also, are there any breaks during the semester?
Okay. First of all, we have move-in dates. We will start bringing our athletes in around the 6th, I believe, of August. The first day of class will still be the 19th. We will have move-in dates all the way through there. They are being, actually, they have to do that by appointment. So we will have those. And are there any breaks? I'm trying to think if there is a federal holiday. Of course, there is Labor Day. That will be, as far as I know, that will be the only break that we will have between now and Thanksgiving. I'm trying to think. I think Martin Luther King Day is in second semester, I think. But if it was a federal holiday, we are required to have that as a break. But that would be the only break we would have. Now, I will tell you, we will be asking students as much as humanly possible not to be going home if they live out of state. We'll be asking them to be very careful about staying on campus and us getting through the semester with as little disruption as humanly possible with this disease.
One follow-up to that, Carolyn, what about federal election day or the general election?
As far as I know, you are correct. That probably will be a day off, as far as I know. Now, that is not a national, that's not a national holiday. There are some things that are open on that day. So I'll have to look that up and see. I don't know the answer, but I'll have it next week, okay?
Talk a little more about minimizing the size of the class, knowing that we're going to socially distance. I know you talked a little bit about the seating chart and those type of things, but elaborate a little more on the work that facilities and academics have done to minimize folks in the classroom at the same time.
We will have no classroom that will have more than 1/2, 50% of the students that would normally be in that classroom. So if we have a 25-seat classroom, we will have 12 students in that classroom. So basically, and as I said, they'll take, if it's a set chair that we can't move, then every other one or every third one, it'll depend on the seating chart. They will have notes on it that they're not to sit there. In the rooms where there are movable desks and chairs, they will be removed. So there'll only be those. And we will expect those chairs and desks to stay where they are, not to be moved around. So that will be a little different than what you're used to of forming groups or things of that nature. But that we'll be asking that not happen this year, so we can still say our social distancing. But please remember, you're going to be in class. You have to still have your mask on. So the social distancing is important, the mask is important, and the faculty member will have the shield, the 6 foot by 6 foot shield to stand behind so that you can still see them. You can still see their mouths moving and those sort of things that are important for some of our students that need that, need a little extra help in hearing or visualizing what's going on.
Yes, in addition to that, faculty members will be given a face shield that they can wear in addition to the actual divider in their classroom. This one is a bit out of our control, but something that we can address. How will out-of-state students get back to campus safely if they have to take public transportation in order to get to campus?
Well, they will just have to do it as safely as possible. There are people that are flying today. There are people on buses. There are people on trains. You'll have to make sure that you wear a mask, do the very best you can to social distance. Now, I realize on a plane that's not possible, but I will tell you that they are finding that some of the findings that I have read is that the airflow in the planes is being sanitized is probably cleaner than some of the airflow that you've been in. So make sure you wash your hands. If you have to fly and you go into a terminal, you know, wash those hands and use those hand sanitizers, keep those masks on, and do the very best you can. Now, we still have the rule that if you are a faculty or a staff member, that you will need to, if you go out of state, that you will need to quarantine for 5 days before coming back to campus. We will be making sure that our students, that's why we'll be testing them and keeping them, our last test, if you notice, is the 13th. That's still 1 day more than they need to stay before they go to class. So we'll have all of those rec. But as I said, you know, the test, we got to be reasonable about this too. The test is only as good as the day we take it. So it's a baseline. We want everybody to be safe, but there are going to be some positives, and we will need to deal with those appropriately.
Can you talk a little bit about, you gave options for folks to consider taking a semester off if they didn't feel comfortable coming to class as a student. Talk a little bit about how we might be able to serve students who would be impacted by losing scholarships or financial support if they did take time off from their coursework.
Well, of course, that would be your decision. So therefore, you know, your scholarships would not go away unless you had run out of scholarship money, in essence. They could be used the next semester, and financial aid then could be switched to the next semester. It wouldn't be counted unless you go to another school that's totally online, and then it would be counted against you. So your financial aid and your scholarships, if you had earned them for this semester, would still be good for next semester.
A question about testing. Is there a fee for students and employees to be tested during this broad testing dates?
No, and I should have said that. Folks, we are one of the few in the country that's doing all this testing, but we also are one of the very, very few that are paying for it. So you have no cost whatsoever. You don't have to show an insurance card or anything. You just have to sign up and get tested.
Yes, that's an investment that the university is making. One follow-up to that is, can they be tested if they're in the 5-day quarantine because they would be coming from out of state?
Yes. Yes, they can. They need to come and be tested within that window. But stay in your car.
So with schedules changing to have smaller number of students in a classroom, how will they teach the number of students they need to teach at a time? And are professors going to teach 2 lectures for the same course?
Well, we have, because the way we have done this, we have moved things around. You will see that Carter Hall will not be an area where we just meet and have, meetings. Carter Hall is going to be a classroom. Neville is going to be a classroom, that open space. So some of our big classes, we have 2 100-seat classrooms. They will be classrooms, and they will be used constantly. So we have either those that where you have 25 students in a class, you only can have 12 and 12 and 12. Then you'll have classes side by side, like I talked about, where then you can have Zoom over on that meeting, on that space also. So it's been worked out. We have the classes, we have the labs down. Instead of having one lab going, we'll have 2 labs going and the professor between the 2 labs. Those are some of the ways we are doing it. We have some professors that are actually making, in the labs, are making some videos right now. So students will have those if they need those for that. So there are several ways. We have what they call flex, where maybe some students will be coming 1 day a week, and the other group will be coming another day a week. So we have all kinds of different ways that this is going to happen. Nothing's going to be set, but faculty in some cases may be giving the same lecture, but they won't be giving the same lecture across the hall from somebody. They'll be giving one lecture, but it'll be Zoomed to part of you, and part of you will see it in person.
A follow-up question to that, Carolyn. The questions we're getting online is that any different or any more challenging than just offering the course online, period, instead of all of the myriad of ways that we're going to have to offer these courses?
We are doing this so that students have the experience that they've asked for. The vast majority of our students want to be in person. They want to be in class. They want to have that interaction with their faculty. We also are very much, half of us is a STEM institution, which means that we have lots and lots of classes that online would not be feasible. So that's the reason we're doing it this way, of offering all these different ways of doing it to make our students as safe as possible, our faculty as safe as possible, and to offer what our students are asking for.
So in relation to the classroom sizes, some questions about the setup for the classes, what the capacity is for each class for our faculty to know. I know that's something that Rob and other folks are working on, but Carolyn, can you talk a little bit about how faculty could get that information, or maybe that's information we'll share next week?
I think they need to talk. I think the main thing is you need to talk to your chairs. They will be able to tell you within the next week exactly what rooms you're in and how that's going to work. So I think if you contact your chairs, that would be a better way to do that, because it would be hard for Rob to tell you unless he had a list of every single faculty member and how many, all the rooms they're going to be in and what those capacities are. But you can make the assumption that whatever room you're in, you're going to have half the seating power.
Talk a little bit about the dining services and how Sodexo will be providing support to campus this semester.
Okay, now I'm going to punt on this one a little bit because I think I know the answer to this, but I don't want to tell you wrong. So I would like to be able to answer that question next week. I think I know the answer, but I have not been given a full, I've have a PowerPoint from them that showed what they are doing. I think the biggest difference will be there will be a lot of grab and goes, but you also probably will not be going through a line and off and doing it yourself like the salad bar. There'll still be a salad bar, but there will be somebody there that will be serving you so that not a whole lot of people will have their hands in that one area. So I think that's one of the things. Social distancing also, of course, will be happening in the cafeteria.
Okay, another question for faculty. Is there information online for approved information regarding the policies to include in syllabi for their courses? So basically blanket statements for them to use to make sure that students are following mask wearing, social distancing, all of those things.
Yes, ma'am. I believe there is. I believe that was under the campus conversation with the provost, and I think those documents are there. Jen and I will see if we can make sure we find those and make sure we get that out to campus so that they know where to find that. But there is wording for the syllabus. Now, some of that may not be finished, but I think most of it is. So let me find out, but that's where it would be found, under the provost's campus conversation.
Previously, if an employee was tested positive and or was sick, they were able to have time to recover without being docked for sick time or PTO. Is this still the case?
That will be a question that will probably be answered tomorrow during the campus conversation. I know they were still working on how they were going to do that. And so I'm going to punt that one also till next week to make sure we have the right answers and how they're going ahead with that.
What about clinical and hospital rotations for our nursing students? Will that still be moving forward?
Yes, that will move forward. Yes, ma'am. That will continue.
Questions about getting student input of what students wanted related to the plan to return to campus. Talk a little bit about input of how the decision was made for us to move to on campus for the fall.
We had a huge number of students that have reached out to the campus at Morgantown and here wanting in-person delivery. There were also several surveys that were sent out asking what they preferred, how they felt about things, and it was very clear that online learning was not what they felt as comfortable with. And so that's how those decisions were made. Also, we are a campus of in-person. That's what makes us who we are in many ways. We have a lot of campuses around that, of course, do only online, and that's for people that feel comfortable doing that. But a large number of our students made it very clear here, Morgantown, Potomac State, Concord, Glenville, that they did not feel comfortable and did not feel they were getting a premier education.
Thank you, Carolyn. We have about 5 minutes, so if you want to wrap up, we do have a few questions that we didn't get to today in the Q&A, but we will be able to export those from the call and address those for next week, or maybe even address them if they were broad questions that we could answer in the email that goes out that shares the archived video to our campus. So I'll hand it over to you, Carolyn, to close us out.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Great questions. Sorry, there were a few things I didn't have answers for. We'll try to have those answers next week. We'll try to keep you up to date on everything. I had a person the other day say to me, you know, we walk into a store every day and we see the sign, no shoes, no shirt, no service. So I think today we add the word no mask, no shoes, no service. So I think those are the things that we have to think of that just come naturally for the next months. Hopefully this will be done and we can find a way out of this after the first of the year. We don't know that, but we are golden bears, and we are golden bears that know what resiliency is. We know what tough times are, and we care about each other. So let's continue to do that. Continue to have the questions. I appreciate everybody. And we will see you next week. Thank you and have a great one. Bye-bye.